Hello, this is Levistro, the Dragon of Cyberspace, coming to you with all news, tips, and tricks within the gaming spectrum. And normally we don't cover politics. However, sometimes politics steps right into the gaming sphere. And right now we seem to have some good news as the United States government, specifically the current president, President Donald Trump, has signed an executive order going after debanking. And we're going to cover that. Yes. For the CNN business, and I know some people don't like CNN, but we're going to use it anyways. Trump signs an executive order going after debanking. This was updated 16 hours ago. President Donald Trump signed an executive order Thursday that aims to punish banks for restricting services to customers based on their political or religious beliefs, formalizing the banking protections that conservatives and crypto industry advocates have been pushing for. The order directs federal banking regulators to remove the reputation risk language from their guidance to lending institutions, a broad concept that crypto and other businesses say led mainstream lenders to ice them out. While major banks have long denied having a political litmus test for their clients, the executive order adopts a quote-unquote right-wing claim that individuals, their businesses, and their families have been subjected to debanking on the basis of their political affiliations, religious beliefs, or lawful business activities. The order instructs regulators to review whether banks have any past or current formal or informal policies that led to politicized or unlawful bank debanking, the order states. Debanking is an umbrella term for when a bank rejects a customer, for which can happen for any number of reasons. Americans don't have a legal right to a bank account. This is true. And lenders often turn away people or businesses to comply with a mountain of rules and regulations despite to protect the financial system. Debanking has long caused problems for illegal immigrants, we'll just say that, we'll correct them on that one, and poor Americans who often have to resort to unregulated payday lenders with much higher interest rates to make ends meet. And we're going to let you know where that came from. Because I'm Levistro. I love my history. I love my knowledge. And I'm a dragon. I share my knowledge. Yes. But more recently, the term has been used by conservative groups that claim they are victims of left-wing value system that's taken root across corporate America. And not just right-wingers. I know you're going to find this a lot in media. They're saying right-wingers, right-wingers, right-wingers. But we're going to find out this is a global issue that's been going on. Major banks have repeatedly denied accusations that they have been systematically targeted conservative groups, but in recent weeks many have responded by saying they welcome the president's efforts to scale back regulations. Still, Trump has doubled down on these perceived injustices and even claimed this week to have been a victim of debanking himself. On Tuesday, Trump accused JP Morgan, Chase, and Bank of America of rejecting his business after his term ended. The banks discriminated against me very badly. I was good to the banks, the president told CNBC. A JP Morgan spokesperson on Tuesday reiterated the bank's statement that it doesn't close accounts for political reasons, but it said it agrees with President Trump that regulatory change is desperately needed. A Bank of America spokesperson declined to comment on Trump's allegation, but CEO Brian Moynihan also praised Trump for addressing the regulations in place, telling CNBC in an interview that the president's on the right issue. Within the banking industry, several people told CNN they disagree with Trump's claim about debanking conservatives, but are willing to accept the outcome if it helps regulators off their backs. Banks are not closing accounts for political reasons, one bank insider told CNN, but Trump's right that the regulators historically have been relentless to get us to close accounts. Interesting. They're not closing accounts for political issues, but regulators historically have been relentless to get banks to close accounts. That is very interesting that he would say that, in my view. So, by using the reputational risk concept, another source said, it's nuts. We don't say we aren't going to bank conservatives. This may not be the direct path we would have hoped to get to regulatory reform, but we'll take it, the banking source said. The banks are hoping that the regulator will give them more leeway to let customers know why their accounts are being closed, which isn't possible under the current regulatory guidelines. And that's another thing where I want to point out, because later on in this video, we're going to be covering ArchCast and what happened to him. But yes, apparently under the current regulations, they're not allowed to tell you why your account is being closed. Don't you think you had that right to know? Yet regulators are telling the banks they're not allowed to tell you why your accounts are being closed. And it's not just consumers that are having this issue. I found this up from the Daily Economy. This is from last year, December last year. And it literally just talks about the debanking issue. So after an appearance by financier Mark Anderson on the Joe Rogan podcast, Elon Musk exploded with indignation that tech entrepreneurs were being debanked owing to government pressure. Musk himself promoted the appearance, recommending forward this video to friends and family to understand just how evil the government has been. Progressive at Pounce saying the story was exaggerated and agencies have been trying to stop debanking. Yet to seasoned observers of the administrative state, the news have came no surprise, and the whole controversy summarizes what has gone wrong with American government. We should first be clear that debanking means. It does not mean that a government agency has told a bank to close its account. That is generally done for good reasons, usually connected with either fraud or threats to national security. Debanking in the current context means that a bank has closed a customer's account because a fine cost imposed by regulators associated with running the account outweigh the benefit of keeping it open. These costs are not necessarily actual costs, but often threats of costs. At heart, they stem from a fact that during the 1980s and 90s, government agencies deputized banks to be their agents. The government was concerned about money laundering, which was and remains a crime, and decided that banks should do a lot of their investigation of the issue for them to prevent the crimes from happening in the first place. So anti-money AML and know your customer KYC rules were put in place to deputize banks in this law enforcement role. This was quite a revelation in how banks operate in American society. Banks went from custodians of their customers' funds to agents of the state, following more and more quote-unquote suspicious activity reports, SARS, under KYC rules in order to avoid charges of facilitating crime. In 2023, almost 4 million SARs were filed, a number that has steadily increased each year and up from 2.2 million in 2019. While FBI statistics do suggest that money-related crimes have increased since the pandemic, it's also likely that many of these SARs are defensive, filed to shield banks from regulatory intrusiveness. All this activity, however, seems to have little payoff. According to the best research on the subject, anti-money laundering policy intervention has less than 0.1% impact on criminal finances. Compliance costs exceeds recovered criminal funds more than 100 times over, and banks, taxpayers, and organizations are penalized more than criminal enterprises. Indeed, the author of that research, Ronald Paul, calls AML the world's least effective policy experiment. The AML model is ineffective on its own terms. Most fundamentally, however, these laws represent a change in the relationship between banks and customers and the state, as Richard W. Rahn put it back in 2000. A civil society depends on the separation of duties and responsibilities of institutions. By passing the responsibility of detecting money laundering onto banks and their personnel, the government destroys the separation. Loyalties become muddled. Bank employees who are expected to spy upon their customers will lose the bond of trust that is necessary for a civil society. Yes, these are bean counters. These aren't police officers. That's not their job. A free society rests on general presumptions, one of which is that most people are honest. Banking regulations turn that principle on its head. All are suspect, and your bank needs to work on that principle. That's what KYC means. Basically, socialism, communism. The government is always in your business, and the party man is spying on you. You can look at World War II Germany, and you can see a lot of this practice. You can look at Italy, World War II Italy, and you'll see this practice. World War II Spain, you'll see this practice. Soviet Russia, China, you name it. Any totalitarian state, you'll see this practice. Yet once the idea has been established that banks are more beholden to the government than their customers, and that the government can cause you, the bank, a lot of problems if it starts taking an active interest in your affairs, Known in the business as enhanced supervision, the doors open for government abuses. One such abuse was Operation Choke Point, beginning as an initiative within the Department of Justice. Its lawyers have gone down some genuine bad actors and found that choking off those actors' financial oxygen was effective. Their tool for this was a regulatory circular from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that told financial institutions to pay attention to the quote-unquote reputational risk that came about from associating with a variety of businesses, from the legal, payday lending, firearm sales, through the sleazy pornography, get-rich-quick products, to the outright illegal Ponzi schemes, cable box, the scramblers. Banks were told that all these businesses alike carried an outsized risk of being associated with fraudsters, and so posed a risk to the bank's reputation that would invite regulatory scrutiny. And that's the thing I want to point out here. Banks were told by the Department of Justice during Operation Choke Point and stuff that, where's that here? I'm sorry. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation told financial institutions like banks to pay attention to the reputational risk that came from associating from variety of business, from like payday lending and firearm sales, but most importantly, what relates to us gamers, pornography, or even get rich quick products, pay to play and all that stuff. Probably not pay to play, but for the gamer, but microtransactions for I would argue is a get rich quick scheme, because you're nickel and diming you for skins. But adult games, right? We've had this issue before. So this is going back to Operation Choke Point, right? And apparently this goes back to 2014. I can't remember. Let's look that up. It was in 2013. It's an issue in 2013. What else was in 2013? Just pointing that out there. All right. But continuing on, banks responded as I expected, rather than run the risk of having to deal with regulators combing through every aspect of their dealings with these companies. They closed their accounts without notice. Webcam girls, mom and pop payday lenders, firearm dealers around the country started reporting that they had their accounts closed. At the same time, Operation Choke Point coordinating committees were pleased with their progress in starving what they saw as potential fraudsters of financial sustenance and violating people's Fifth Amendment rights. Innocent until proven guilty. You just shut these people down without proving that they're guilty of a crime. Mom and pop shops, gun owners, gun stores, webcam girls. And I'm not trying to defend webcam girls here. All right. I'm not trying to defend any of these people. But they have a right to do their business. Even if we disagree with their business, they have a right. As long as they're not doing anything illegal. And if they're doing something illegal, they must be taken to the full court of law at that time they've broken the law. That's just how the rule of law works. You can't prevent a crime from happening. We've seen a lot of Hollywood movies and stories and even historical records of people trying to prevent crimes before they happen, only to cause a totalitarian police state, a corrupt totalitarian police state. If you want proof of that, all you have to do is read up your history on 1920s prohibition. Yes. What clued these businesses into what was happening was that some of the account closure letters mentioned things like risk of authority intervention. Without these letters, Choke Point might have continued indefinitely. However, thanks to the leadership of congressmen like Blaine Luetkemeyer, congressional investigations were able to find a treasure trove of internal agency documents about the operation, and the regulators were forced to admit their reconciliated approach to the matter had led to collateral damage. So a lot of people's companies and businesses were destroyed and damaged due to Choke Point, and yet they were innocent and broke no crime. They broke no law. Choke Point finally sputtered out of its last breath during the Trump administration. However, the model remained intact, using agency guidelines and a threat of regulatory intervention to get financial institutions to cut off customers whose activities you disfavor. This model gives plausible deniability to agencies. We only use enforcement against real bad actors. Banks can choose whom they serve. We have nothing to do with it, while still enabling the agencies to use what is known as job boning to indirectly compel behavior of the private actors. That appears to be what is happening was become as Operation Choke Point 2. which Anderson talked about in his interview with Joe Rogan. The idea that something coordinated was going on was first investigated by podcaster Nick Carter for pirate wires. He identified a concerted attack on financial services access for people operating in the cryptocurrency space. Full disclosure, I stay out of cryptocurrency. I don't understand it. I don't believe it's the next best thing since sliced bread because it's something that can potentially be heavily regulated by the government. That's just how I feel on it. I don't fully understand it, so I stay out of it. But I'm just reporting the news on this one. Not only were their business and personal financial services under attack, but so were specialized banks that serviced them. Once again, the FDIC was an elite with guidance joined by officers of the Comptroller of the Currency and Federal Reserve. Unlike fintech entrepreneurs, which had the forefront of calling foul, unlike Choke Point One, banks rarely gave an explanation for their actions. So, unlike Choke Point One, banks rarely gave any explanation for their actions, making the paper trail more difficult to trace. So they're just arbitrarily saying, we got to protect our brand. Yet it isn't just crypto or organizations start by guidance. Religious conservatives like National Committee for Religious Freedom, held by the former Chancellor, Senator Ambassador Sam Brownback, found themselves debanked. Others have been de-insured, yet others have been debanked similarly for the offense of providing a platform to now the President-elect Donald Trump. Now, you can be of any side of the political aisle, and I will say, yes, you should be always skeptical of people, even in your tribe. I don't know much about this. I stay out of partisan politics. I really do. But it doesn't take a right-winger, as CNN is claiming, and we're going to find out from New York Times is claiming, to find out that this isn't just a right-wing issue. This affects everyone, regardless of the issue. But I will say that Operation Choke Point happened under the Obama administration, which would be it's interesting that people, when we know the time frame and all this, why the left is defending it. Just my personal thoughts on the matter. There is evidence that regulators required banks to search their customers' transactions for terms only potentially related to political activity after the January 6th Capitol riot. So there is evidence of targeting conservatives and Republicans. Purchases like religious texts and at vendors like Bass Pro Shops were all the grits up to the mill. Bank of America even voluntarily provided evidence on which its customers have been in Washington, D.C. on the day the net for domestic violence extremists and suspicion transactions was cast far and wide, according to the House Judiciary. Oh, so there is even more evidence of this. Continuing on. All right, we'll do this. It's a link source. So this is from judiciaryhouse.gov. These discussions were involved some of the financial institutions in the United States, such as Barclays, U.S. Bank, Schwab, PayPal, and many others. Text include keyword filtering of transactions like MAGA and Trump, as well as purchases of books, religious texts, Bass Pro Shop, exporting goods. So there is evidence, CNN. There is a lot of evidence, including with PayPal. And we're going to get into PayPal in a moment here. Yes, we are. Sorry, I'm reading fast, but this is a lot of information. Indeed, Banks of America and their other actions seem to suggest something more serious than job boarding is going on. Banks have essentially developed a form of Stockholm Syndrome, wanting to please the regulators rather than the people who pay them to provide a service. Regulators don't even need to threaten anything anymore. This is, however, the natural endpoint of the tradition of AML and KYC laws so many years ago, and breaking the bond of trust between banker and customer that is necessary for civil society. It is also what regulators really want, a compliant populace, the real end goal of the administrative state. Which also means that regulatory fixes like requiring fair access and so on will not suffice. As long as the threat of KYC supervision is there, bankers will find a way to cordon off customers, likely at some point to incur regulatory disapproval. What is instead needed is discipline on the regulators, not the banks, and eventually the unwinding of the whole failed AML KYC experiment. Better alternative is to go with the rule of law. All are under the rule of law. If you break the law, you're punished for it. No ifs, ands, or buts. No special favors. That includes the government, the regulators, The people committing the crime, the banks, customers, all are under the rule of law, as is tradition, as is what it once was. If Anders Season, and if I say your name wrong, dude, I do apologize. And Musk is as important voices in this. However, perhaps such an outcome is not as pie in the sky as it would have seemed a few weeks ago. If the Department of Government officially DOJ sets its sights on our many financial regulators, then perhaps real financial freedom is within reach. All right. And I do want to point this out, and I've read this. This is from New York Times. They've been really spotty on this, trying to downplay the whole thing. President Trump family business sued Capital One for closing its accounts following January 6th attack on the Capitol, but Capital One has denied wrongdoings and lawsuits is continuing. This is by Rob Copeland. He covers Wall Street and banks. And this was made yesterday. But I want you to notice that I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's basically a repeat of what we've already said. But a lot of articles I've read so far seem to show this out. And no, we're not going to be covering politics forever. This is related to gaming, and we're going to show why. So anyways, he writes it rather snarky, trying to say this is a catch-all, and tries to make it seem like it's some big thing that it's not. But he points out something interesting here. Major banks largely insist they are blameless for the closed account, saying the regulations began under President Obama. And continuing Mr. Trump's first burn, and the Biden administration required him to take a hard line against potential customers. So this started with the Obama administration, was still around during the Trump administration, and carried on to the Biden administration, who went after people for January 6th as well as COVID. According to this article, according to the New York Times, all right, they say it was a fringe issue. Obviously, it wasn't. It could use mainstream alignment groups, and even some liberals accused lenders of politically motivated discrimination. Politics that get to the spotlight, and he also says that these so-called debanking remains unproven, including Trump's claims. But as we have seen, and if you're a gamer, you know this is not the case. We have a lot of evidence. You have Visa censoring Japanese artists. You have Steam being forced to update their policies. You have Collective Shout getting on Visa to censor things, unsavory, as they called it, right? The sleazy pornography, right? You have that. Sleazy pornography. You have that. So, like, this guy tries to be snarky about it. It's because, it's Donald Trump doing this, right? Like, Donald Trump wrote this executive order. But he says it was a lot of so-called claims, debanking, unproven. And we're going to go into that. PayPal has a history of shutting people's accounts. And we just discovered the history of all this, and that there is evidence, even in the White House on official federal government websites you can look up. But yes, we can see it here because, like, in this article from Automaton, Visa's Japan CEO says disabling card payments is necessary to protect the brand, which, as we mentioned earlier, right? Reputational risk, right? Necessary to protect the brand. And what are they trying to protect it from? Adult content to be removed or censored in manga and anime artists, right? But we have another news on this. So now that we know this, I'm going to point out more on this. This came from Madam Savvy. PayPal has begun debanking random creators who speak out. The sent and be removed is coming. So far, my own account is untouched, but be wary if you use it. Do not store your money on it if possible. I have had many art friends go through this and lose access to money for 120 days. No one should lose access to this unless you're actually doing something law breaking like assassination, harassment, or child trafficking, in which case the law should be notified. Yes, the law, not the, the law. Making videos and talking about how poopy governments and pay processors should not get you debanked. Of course, I imagine if PayPal fixes, they would just claim, oopsie, I don't know what happened, ooh. And she's quoting ArchCast. And ArchCast came out here. I was just randomly deplatformed from PayPal. No reason given other than the unusual activities. Nonsense, of course. And I was redirected to a page telling me about the rules of card companies. Please make some noise about this if you can and spread the word. So here's the screenshot he showed. We no longer offer PayPal services account. After review, we discovered unusual activity on this account we cannot support. Your account is permanently deactivated. You still can view your transaction history. Before you can transfer any remaining funds from your account, we must reserve them for up to 120 days to cover any financial obligations. We will review your account and email when your funds are available. Now, from what I understand, this account that ArchCast has was for a game he was making. Here's another screenshot. Why does the PayPal support certain activities and not others? Under these card network rules, right? PayPal complies with these requirements as well as applicable local laws. Again, Visa, Mastercard, which we have been covering a lot of videos that you can find throughout my channel. All right, you can find that out real quick. But yes, so how does PayPal interact with card networks and banking partners? So this is basically going back into debanking, right? So ArchCast did post an update. I'm going to shout out to not Levistro out here, but he also shares the White House thing, but so here we see the ArchCast has an update on the paywall situation. I now received 2 emails. One stating that my account was locked due to an error in the currency system. Another email confirmed that my account is locked. Well, that's progress. Basically leading towards that it was a fuck up idea. And what did Madam Savvy say? Oops, our bad, right? Ooh, right? So I asked Grok for information on the paywall. So Totally Not Levistro asked for information on the paywall since I'm locked out of my X. Shout out to this dude, by the way. Awesome dude. You should go subscribe or follow Totally Not Levistro. Awesome, a dragon after my own heart. He asked if Grok can list any of the class action lawsuits against PayPal over the years for illegal activity, including withholding funds and closing accounts without warning. And Grok cites Combe versus PayPal in 2002, alleged freezing funds without notice, settled in 2004 for $9.25 million. Zapita versus PayPal 2010, and proper account holds reserves without notice, settled in 2017. Evans versus PayPal in 2022, unlawful freezes and fund seizures, filed as proposed class action, status ongoing. So PayPal has a history of this. And over here, he asked, is it illegal for PayPal to shut down an account and take money? Notice that Totally Not Levistro is running his own account here, not me. I don't have access to it. As Levistro does not have access to Totally Not Levistro's account. So Totally Not Levistro is running his own account, and I'm just narrating through it. The legality of PayPal shutting down an account and seizing funds depends on the specific circumstances. PayPal is usually to allow customers freeze or limit accounts and holds up to 180 days or longer in some cases if suspect violations of its accessible use policy, AUP, fraudulent activity, regulatory compliance. The agreement also permits PayPal to seize funds to cover liquid damages or reimburse customers to the use or chargebacks. These actions are generally considered legal as they are part of the contract users agree to in signing up for PayPal. Did you read the terms of service when you're signing? Because that's what you agreed to, is what it's saying. However, the agreement's broad and vague terms have been criticized for giving PayPal significant discretion, sometimes without clear justification or recourse for users. Legal challenges and allegations. Several lawsuits have challenged PayPal's practices, alleging for the company's unlawfully seized funds for adequate notice, explanation, or due process. For example, a 2002 lawsuit in California claimed PayPal violated racketeering laws by freezing accounts and seizing funds from one plaintiff to and another without clear reasons or opportunities to appeal. The lawsuit argued that PayPal's actions amounted to theft and that the company failed to provide proper notification or recourse. Another lawsuit filed by Gary Nitz in 2022 as well alleged PayPal unlawfully converted money from his account, citing vague AUP violations without prior notice or a clear path to recover funds. Plaintiffs in these cases argued that seizing entire account balances without a direct connection to actual damage is illegal under common law, as liquidated damages must be reasonable and not punitive. While these lawsuits highlight user grievances, PayPal has denied wrongdoing, stating it reviews claims and responds through legal channels. No definitive court ruling for these cases had been widely reported to establish illegality, so the legal status remains unresolved in many instances. And that's because they settle out of court, right? That's why they want to settle out of court. They don't have to continue to court. They can't have to say, "Oh, we've done nothing wrong." They're still retaining the right to innocent until proven guilty because they haven't been proven guilty. I'm no lawyer. This is my understanding from civics education. Regulatory and legal consideration, the anti-money laundering law (AML) and know your customer regulations. What we discussed earlier. PayPal is a financial service provider. It's subject to AML, KYC laws globally. It may freeze accounts or seize funds if it suspects fraud, money laundering, or regulatory non-compliance. These actions are generally illegal if aligned with regulatory requirements, though lack of transparency can frustrate users. Jurisdictional laws. In the U.S., PayPal operates as a money transmitter, not a bank, and is regulated under state money transmitter laws. Funds in PayPal accounts are not FDIC insured, and users have no ownership interest in PayPal's pooled investments of customer funds. This structure is legal, but it limits user protections compared to traditional bank accounts. So using PayPal over your bank, while it is very convenient, you're not protected as you would be under an actual bank. You have fewer protections. Consumer protection laws. In some jurisdictions, seizing funds without clear notice or appeal processes may violate customer protection laws. For example, U.S. common law limits liquidating damages to reasonable compensation, not penalties, which some argue PayPal's practices exceed. In Europe, where PayPal Europe is classified as a bank, stricter regulations may apply, potentially making arbitrary fund seizures more legally questionable. Practical implication: a lack of notice or explanation. Many users report that PayPal freezes accounts or seizes funds without clear reasons, making it difficult to appeal. This has led to accusations of theft. Through PayPal's user agreement technically permits such actions. So even though it's theft, you're permitting them to do it when you signed and agreed to the terms of service. This is why you read the terms of service. I'm not justifying what PayPal has done. I think it's scummy. I think it is illegal to all hell. But it takes two to tango. You signed a contract, an agreement, a mutual agreement with PayPal saying you were okay with this. This is why you read everything. This is why when you buy a house, you read the fine print. When you buy a car, you read the fine print. When you sign a contract for employmentship, you read the fine print. Everything you do, you sign your name to that's going to be legally binding. You have to read the fine print. A lawyer will tell you this. Unfortunately, like when I used to do freelancing, I had a lawyer read over the contract before I signed it and sent it back to the client I was going to work for, or negotiate a better contract, because some things in there were more favorable for the client than it was for me. And I want to make sure my children had to eat too. I had to pay my bills. I had to do all these other things as well. So I made sure my interests were met as well. So I always had a lawyer read. Now it would be kind of silly to hire a lawyer for every time you sign a term of service. I agree 100%. Which is why over the years we've seen heavier and more legalese terms of service because we just click through and not sign anything. But the days are coming where we still have to sign things, and we're paying the Pied Piper for not signing them. We are. But continuing on, 100-day hold period, PayPal offers often holds funds for 180 days to cover potential chargebacks and disputes. After this period, funds may be released, but in some cases, PayPal retains them, citing AUP. Users have reported mixed success in recovering funds by escalating, blah, 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 blah. It's not inherently legal. But what can you do is check the registration center, contact support, file a complaint for regulatory bodies like the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, or whatever is equivalent to your state or province. Seek legal advice. Talk to a lawyer, especially if large sums are avoiding. Joining a class action lawsuit may be an option as well. Avoid PayPal for high-risk businesses. If you sell high-risk items, electronics, tickets, or operate a non-profit, consider a different payment processor like Stripe or Square to avoid freezes. In other words, don't have your eggs in one basket. Have different options. So yeah, they are generally legal, but they shouldn't be. And then with Trump's new executive order, that might change. But let's see what his executive order. I was thinking about reading the whole fact sheet, but this is already getting pretty long. At the time of this recording, it's been 37 minutes. And I'm going to see what I can edit down in editing. But this is just a fact sheet of his stuff. So prohibiting closed-sites or unlawful debanking. Today, the president signs an executive order to ensure federal regulators do not promote policies or practices that allow financial institutions to deny or restrict services based on political beliefs, religious beliefs, or lawful business activities, ensuring fair access to banks for all Americans. And that's the key part here, for at least for gamers, is law business activities. The order directs federal banking regulators to remove reputational risk and other concepts that enable politicized or unlawful debanking from their guidance, examination manuals, and other materials. So basically, they can no longer set. They have to protect the brand, like in Visa's case, right? That's what I'm understanding. The order instructs Small Business Administration to require all financial institutions subject to jurisdiction to make efforts to reinstate clients and potential clients previously denied services. The order directs the Secretary of Treasury, in consultation with assistance to the President for Economic Policy, to develop a comprehensive strategy to further combat politicized or unlawful debanking activities, including potential legislative or regulatory solutions. The order requires federal banking regulators to review financial institutions for past and or current policies encouraging politicized or unlawful debanking and taking remedial actions, including fines or consent decrees. So basically, if there's records that these banks like PayPal have unlawfully debanked customers and clients, they could be facing heavy fines and penalties. The order further requires federal banking regulators to review supervisory and compliant data for instances of unlawful debanking based on religion and refer such cases to the Attorney General, because the freedom of religion is a constitutional right in America, and that's a serious human rights violation. It says it's under especially abuses by financial institutions that undermine free expression and economic opportunity. Yep, free expression. So, yes, I'm not going to read the whole thing. You guys can look that up yourselves if y'all wanted to. But that's the whole gist of the matter. We have the media saying, "Oh yeah, the debanking is a non-issue. It's basically a myth, unproven." And we, as gamers, know that there are cases of it happening. There's sting policies. We have people reporting and showing screenshots that they've been having their shit shut down for no reason, like ArchCast, anime and manga artists being silenced, games being removed under threat. So I think this is a move in a right direction, and I will say, even if Joe Biden did this last in his administration, I would say this would be a good move, because I am not political. I don't take tribe sides, but since Donald Trump has done this, and people at least had their little veggies run bloody on Shark Week whenever you mention Trump, I'm still going to say this was a good move from him. Good job. We'll see if it pays out. Well, what do you think, viewer? Put your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, happy gaming.